Welcome, everyone, to the Repackaging Revolution. I'm your host, David Marinak. Before we get to our guest, I'd like to share what we call our podcast power statement or name of today's show, which is the hidden value of proper packaging, which leads to our guest today. Jessica Schwartz is what's known in the industry as a packaging therapist. She's CEO and founder of Strategic Packaging Partners, has an extensive background in packaging design and sales, has a master's in packaging from Michigan State, and with stops at Catalia, Mexican Foods, and General Mills. Jessica Schwartz, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, and don't worry about the dogs in the background. I've got dogs in the background too. And it's funny. What's interesting is our dog, Henry, I think I told you this when you and I were chatting. If the UPS driver is within a mile of our house, because he brings treats, Henry goes ballistic. And God forbid the truck go past our house without stopping, then he's kind of like, he goes into a depression mode. So, I mean, yeah, it's, but you have a new puppy, if I remember correctly, right?
We have a puppy. She wants to be running around and chewing on everything.
Exactly.
She just can't right now. She just needs to be over there.
Exactly. Be over there. Over there. So
take a puppy nap.
Exactly. Please. It's like our children. It's like, could you please? And it seems like it never fails. If you remember back when our kids were really small, as soon as we got on the computer or the phone or whatever it is, that's when they wanted us. They were perfectly fine. And it's like, mom, dad. It's like, I need you right now. It's like, stop. You're driving me crazy. Well, let's dig in. I'm thrilled to chat with you, and again, we'll just do a brief flyby of your past stops along the way. But what I really wanted to, and again, being in the packaging space and being colleagues, I always find it, enjoyable to chat with somebody that's in our same space. That understands the challenges of the industry. We were just chatting offline about AI and are both of us kind of concerned, but have no clue where to start. Where does AI go? But let's go back to, how does somebody go? Because initially you went to school not for packaging. There was something that drew you to Michigan State and getting a master's in packaging. Take us, what happened? Where did that come from?
Sure, absolutely. So I started out. I got a degree in biology and started at General Mills after college. And I was not in a packaging role. And then the role that I was in wasn't my favorite. And so I looked around within the company for other opportunities. And there were a couple packaging roles open. And I thought, well, that kind of sounds cool. It's kind of
different.
It's different. And I love engineering. And so I thought, hey, why not? So I kind of hopped over into packaging then. I really liked it. And so then I decided to go back for an actual degree. So let me ask you a question. So while you were at General Mills, you decided to kind of go after that industry. Did you stay at General Mills and go to Michigan State? Or were you really? Oh, that's so cool. So Michigan State has an online program.
Nice. Very cool. And with that, then you stayed on at General Mills for a while and then did your thing as a packaging engineer at General Mills, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of all along, actually. The intention was to become an engineer. So I was able to do a lot of engineering work, even though I was at school. I worked as an engineer because it's what I ultimately wanted to do. So it was a pretty sweet gig.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but I really think, and I know we'll get into this further down on our podcast, but I really think, especially as we get into, talking about young people in the industry, talking about making change in the industry, or at least sharing information, I can't help but think, and I know you'll agree, that it really starts at the young people. It really starts at the Michigan State level or even before, because there's a lot of information that's out there. Paper's bad, paper's good, plastic's bad, recyclable is the way, but no, compostable and biodegradable is the way. There's so much misinformation that it's become a political hot potato.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, if, did Michigan State go into any of that kind of, talking about, I guess you could say, good and bad or different types of packaging in the environment?
Yeah.
Or was that sort of new back then?
They did do a little bit of it. I think in the last few years, the conversation has really accelerated.
Yes.
And has changed profoundly. Even every year it changes, right? It's crazy.
Right.
And so I think you're right. I think it's really hard to tease out the truth about everything. To say that 7 billion people on the earth aren't influencing the earth is not where we want to go with it. But then also saying, also saying like packaging is going to be the end of the world. That's the other extreme, right? And so we know everything. We know the truth lies somewhere between the two like scary extremes, it doesn't exist or it's going to kill us. And so I think we as a packaging industry do need to talk a lot about what the true benefits are of sustainable packaging and what does sustainable packaging mean, and how do we keep packaging out of landfills? What else can we do? At the same time, protect the product so that we're not generating product waste on top of packaging waste. So it's definitely there's a lot going on.
Oh, it's like you said, and you mentioned something which I thought was spot on when you said, what does sustainable packaging even mean? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people that are in decision-making positions with packaging that don't understand the difference between the terms sustainable, biodegradable, compostable, eco-friendly. And it's like, that to me is a major opportunity. Yes, it's a flaw, but I see it, and I know you do too, as an opportunity for us to share information that hopefully brings people to the table. We're not looking to make enemies of anybody.
No.
We're looking to bring people, because it's just like, at least you can tell the truth or know the truth, Mr. Retailer or Mr. Sustainability person or whatever. It's just like, and that's one of the things. It's such like, why aren't we even talking about these things? Why aren't we educating people? And it just is, I don't know whether packaging, and I know you've gone through this. Usually a lot of people go through and packaging's an afterthought.
Yes.
Packaging's the last thing they think about. But yet maybe, just maybe, Jessica, this is an opportunity for us to put it more at the forefront here, because it's one global, economy, so to speak. It's one global, and it's not a U.S. versus the U.K. or U.K. versus China or China versus the world. It's all of us. And if we're not, if we're all fighting against each other, even in packaging, well, then this is a runaway train. And I would care to think otherwise. And I think this is an opportunity, even if we start on the packaging level.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think packaging is thought of kind of at the end. And while the product is designed, and then the graphics are designed, and then, we're just going to print this on something. I think some of that's changing a little bit, especially with different goals and objectives that companies have for sustainability.
Right.
But I'm not sure it's changing for the right reasons, because I think packaging is becoming even more confusing for people. And I also think that what can kind of drive clarity is if every company starts creating their own sustainability story and their goals. I really see two different types of companies. You've got the manufacturer of the good that also sells the good under their brand name. And then you have a lot of co-man manufacturers who are receiving a lot of different requests from their customers. Right. And so there's a ton of complexity in manufacturing in and of itself. And then you layer sustainability on top of that, and it just kind of goes off the rails. And it gets really confusing, because you hear, if you step back and you say in general, what's happening in the industry, what is happening in packaging, right? We see all this legislation coming out around no EPS, no plastics, like plastic is the devil. We want to get rid of all the plastic. And so you're like, okay, but plastic really makes an amazing barrier, and you can actually use less energy and get more protection for your product if you use plastic. And so right there, like, people vapor lock, right? And so if you can just, for your company, you can take a step back and say, hey, okay, where are we using a ton of plastic? Is there a way we could consolidate and reduce some of it and do smart manufacturing, right?
Correct.
So you're not only reducing complexity in manufacturing, you're also getting the added benefit of a sustainability claim. Trying to think strategically like that. And then if you can come up with some of those goals that you can communicate to your customers, because ultimately your customers want to achieve their own goals, but they're looking for help from their co-mans. They're looking for some kind of guidance, right? They'll throw guidance out there because they're trying to give some kind of guardrails. But if you, as a manufacturer, can come back and say, hey, actually, this is what's reasonable for us, that's kind of a great way to start to approach things. Like you said earlier, there's just not a lot of, it's a lot of whack-a-mole And it's a lot of disorganization out there, right? So you look at some statistics, like 10% of plastics that could be recyclable actually make it into the stream. You look at polypropylene that keeps going recyclable, like widely recyclable, and then not widely recyclable, because we don't have infrastructure in this country that is unified. You don't have universal collection. You don't have universal processing. So that whole back end is broken. But then we're trying to solve it on the front end with all sorts of new materials and mandates and things like that. So I'm not really sure how that's going to shake out, because it's complicated, and driving everybody into more sustainable materials that ultimately cost more, that are forcing inflation even higher, right? Because those are passed along costs, is not quite what the right thing is. I don't think. I see a lot of companies right now saying, hey, look, we have complicated manufacturing. We're throwing away obsolete packaging. We're throwing away waste. This is getting kind of crazy. And that's where we step in as packaging engineers and cross-functional partners. We can kind of tease apart where the inefficiencies are. And I think if we can get really lean in manufacturing, then as we start thinking about some of these changes, changing materials or whatever is next, if you have good control of your manufacturing, it's a lot easier to start testing new packaging in different structures and things, because you already have a great baseline. And that's where I kind of see a lot of companies focusing, is driving out the waste and the complexity, especially in that co-manufacturing space where things have gotten really complicated because they've kind of said a lot of yeses to new clients. And now they kind of need to say, hey, wait, just a second. And I think co-mans should be empowered to do that, and to tell their customers, like, hey, we could save you money. We could be more sustainable if we took a look at these different avenues, and kind of drive the noise out of there, because you're right. There's just a lot of new materials, and we're working with them every day, but they're not just like a plug and play for most companies.
You know, you said a lot in there, and there's probably 3 or 4 different pieces that I really want to, first and foremost, what we try to teach our reps in the packaging space for years is, first and foremost, and I know you'll agree, we have to protect the product. Mm-hmm. You don't start the opposite, where you try to do something good for the environment or whatever story you tell yourself. The product needs to be protected. I don't care whether it's beef jerky. I don't care whether it's a product that goes in an Amazon, envelope somewhere. But if you start there, that's the one thing. But the other thing that's really important, and I heard you say this too, maybe not directly, but it's going to take those of us in this space, whether it's engineers, those that sell it, those that kind of commingle everybody together. There's a tremendous amount of courage that it takes to stand tall and just speak the facts. For example, it's become such a politicized environment out there. If you just follow the money that's behind the Greenpeaces of the world or whatever, that's not the way those organizations were founded. They're now become political action committees with millions and millions of dollars behind them, just to do nothing but either build business for one other industry or take away from another one. My point with sharing this is that back to the courage comment, those of us in this space have got to be willing to stand tall on the data, on the information. And again, it doesn't have to be creating enemies or I'm right, you're wrong, but it's just let the data prove itself. Just like you said, a lot of this kind of packaging that people that just assume is better for the environment because CNN or Fox News or somebody told them, versus what truly is a sustainable example in reduction of plastic. Here's the other thing that I find it really mind-blowing to me, and I'd love your take on this. So many companies out there are afraid to tell their story. For example, they're afraid because, again, people are confused. Oh boy, the anti-plastic people are going to hate me. Oh, the paper people are going to. And for example, I really think John Q. Public, who have made it very clear that we want to do whatever's best for the environment. This isn't a pro this or pro that, whatever's best. But so few companies are willing to literally explain why they're using the packaging they're using. I don't care whether it's a QR code that leads to a video that says, hey, you don't realize we were using a 5-gallon bucket before. The
Yeah.
bucket is very expensive, and we've now replaced it with a spouted pouch that is 80% less plastic. Now you can, again, I know there's people that hate plastic, so to speak, but we've reduced this is a sustainable example. And I really
Yeah.
think if John Q. Public understood that, the reason, and again, I share this because I don't see anybody, even the biggest brands, they just don't want to, they don't want to take a stand. They can take a stand that's popular. They'll take a stand that's just it's low lying fruit.
Yeah.
We're Delta Airlines. We're going to make a comment that we're going to eliminate all plastic cups. Great. Pat ourselves on the back, but no comment, no data on how many trees and how much energy and the paper that's going to come from doing the opposite side.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And I know there's
I
two
do.
sides of this, but it's like it's just like I really think if people share or companies share their story, their philosophy, why they're using what they're using, they may find more buy-in. My take.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I mean, a lot of the big guys do have ESG goals where they're hitting targets and explaining how they're getting there. I think you're hitting a little bit on the complexity of the issue, and that is
Right.
You see the consumers and what the consumers are being told by the media. The
Right.
consumers are being told that paper is better. In this instance, the Delta Air, in this instance.
Yeah.
But then if you start digging into it and you realize how much fresh water it takes to make paper, and you realize fresh water is actually our most scarce resource.
Exactly.
Then you start thinking about it, and you're right. But everyone is so with social media, loud opinions. I think it's hard for a lot of these organizations to really take a stand, and it's also very confusing, right? Because we just talked about how plastic cups might be better than paper cups, but that is not what you're hearing right now. And then is paper better, or is it compostable? Because hey, Delta Airlines, you have food waste and packaging waste. It could all go together in industrial compostable, right? Or is incineration better, right? Like if you have 100 pounds, it's like 100 pounds of waste can reduce down to 1 pound of ash. And you're like,
Correct.
Oh, now all we're dealing with is 1 pound of hazardous ash instead of 100 pounds of leaching trash.
Right.
So you're like, is incineration best? There really isn't a best for everything everywhere, right? The only thing that is best for everyone everywhere is use the least amount possible and don't be wasteful. Don't be wasteful with resources, right? I mean, my grandparents, I don't know about yours. I remember her like rinsing out Ziploc bags, right?
Everything
and you're like, wow,
to
that's
use it
really off the
again.
rails. Yeah. And you're like, but is it? And there's just like a different philosophy of living for those that came out of the Depression or were raised in the Depression, that all of our resources are something that we should treasure and honor and appreciate. And we've sort of turned into a consumer based fast fashion of every kind culture, right? We have a lot of extra, even though we talk about the cost going up. There's still a lot of unnecessary things being sold. Of course, they bring joy to our life, but it's kind of a mindset too on the consumer side. And I don't know, we just talked about a lot, but
well, no, I mean,
everything's related.
Well, it really is because, and that's why it's so evident when just, you and I are talking. That's why so many people are confused. If we don't understand it, we've been in this business for how many years, or we're not able to explain it in such a way. But it's, for example, back to the Delta thing, and because there's such a strong opinion on the recycle side of things. And if you want to talk about cups or whatever, think about an airplane. I mean, we know they pick up the trash after each flight. That's a closed area that they could actually literally commit to taking those cups, putting it into a recycled opportunity and making more cups and doing it. I mean, this isn't like you have to send it to the landfill, but
no,
it's just like, how come people aren't thinking like this? And it's just
and honestly about Delta, I don't know if they do that or not. I've never looked at their kind of their goals or whatever, but I think what your point is there is a lot of opportunity. There are pockets of opportunities, right? So when you think about compostable materials, they don't make sense for your everyday consumer because only 3% of the population in the US has access to industrial compostable
Posters. Yep.
collection, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
when you say industrial compostable, that means you need to have the right heat and the right
Yep.
oxygen parameters. There's a lot that goes into kind of a static heap, aerated static heap, industrial compostable, super nerdy
Yep.
scenario there. So it's not things that are going to disappear in your backyard. So, okay, that probably isn't the right way to go, right? 3% of people, I mean, I'm not going to spend my money on compostable packaging for retail, but again, like in that food service space, like that's a great example of where it's super easy because you've got your browns and your greens, everything mixed together. That's where we should focus compostable materials, right? So I think we're so segmented in packaging where there's just different areas where the right solution prescribed by where the packaging and how the packaging is being used in a lot of sense. And so if we can just kind of break it down a little bit and get simple, then I think that's where people can see more clearly.
Yeah, and again, I think to tie that segment together is spot on in the fact that there's not a cookie cutter approach.
Mm-hmm.
Every company, every product is different. And again, and that's where a lot of times, back to the way things were for your grandparents, my grandparents versus now, and we're such a consuming sort of give it to me now, forget about next year, next week, whatever. And there's such an opportunity, but it's like a runaway train. We literally for the last 20 plus years have been this me too, me too, me too. Right now, I want it right now. I want it right now. But again, there's just no one fix for everybody. It's what works best for that individual. And again, back to that one word of having the courage to say, this is why we're doing what we're doing. I am, I'm in the pharmaceutical, I'm Johnson and Johnson, and we're doing this. Like you said, too, which I think is a really, really, really good point. What are their goals? What is a company's goals to, if you're not measuring this, if you're not looking at the big picture, then we're like dogs chasing our tails, right?
Absolutely. And I think companies can do things for themselves to put them into a situation where they can start creating metrics.
Right.
We talk about the complexity, right? A lot of mid-size, even large-size manufacturers don't really have packaging specs organized, right? So like if you think about what do you want to do, how do we get to a plan, right? Well, first you have to have your packaging specs together, right? So this is kind of what we do. We do this like every day at Strategic Packaging Partners. We come in and we kind of help create clarity in this way. So here's a little flavor is you come in and say, hey, what are you doing right now, right? Like, and a lot of times if there's a lot of ERP systems don't have great packaging modules. And so it's like really hard to put information in there if you can't extract meaningful information.
Yeah.
It's as simple as putting all of your specs into an Excel spreadsheet and just kind of diving into, okay, where are you at right now and where could opportunities lie? And if you can stay kind of nose down and sort through your own things and then take a step back and say, okay, where could we focus? That's really where people can get clear and start delivering a message to the marketplace of what they want to accomplish, right? And then it's all about testing and having the experts there, even on strategy calls, right? When you're thinking about making a change or trying to mine different areas of the business, even having a packaging engineer there and able to talk on your cross-functional teams is super important. We just have somebody right now sitting on a food manufacturer's team and they're just helping with like new product development, things to consider and watch outs and really trying to think ahead for mistakes that could happen or opportunities to be better so that from the very beginning, product is designed efficiently.
Right.
And if you can do that, then all this like sustainability piece and whatever else is kind of screaming in the market, you can tune into that now because you feel confident in what you're doing. You can start listening to some of that noise and start teasing out like, okay, what's the truth for us? What makes sense? What's logical, right? Because so much of this just isn't really logical. It doesn't really apply in a great way and it's more confusing than not. So if you can just get like really good on the home base, right? Then you can start exploring other avenues or other areas that you're hearing come up, like especially like AI and things, right? Like all this stuff's coming at you. So
well, let's run with that a little bit. It's a great segue into what your company does. And I know we chatted a little bit about General Mills, whatever, but and I think it's and I really wasn't putting two and together, but I think you're spot on here. Your business Tell us about your business, how you got into that, because I want to lead into what you just mentioned about being a partner with your customers to be able to kind of help them gather this data, gather this information, and then be able to speak from a position of strength, be able to say,
Mhm.
this is what we're doing. So take us into that because it's a great segue.
We're a team of primarily packaging engineers, but then we also have adjacent experts as well. And we are often called in when there are problems. And a lot of the problems come from packaging that's not working right for a variety of reasons. And so the cool thing about the way the world is kind of shifting a little bit is that companies no longer need to commit to like a full-time person to do even like if they need somebody fractionally. Let's say they need a packaging
Right.
engineer, but they're
Right.
not sure how long and they want somebody experienced. This new way of working where you have like our company was a bunch of experts that you can kind of tap into when you need them for as long as you need them. I think this is going to be growing over the next few years because of
Agreed.
how dynamic business is in general.
Right.
And so we come in and we can kind of assess, okay, what's going on? A lot of times we end up speaking with people in operations because that's kind of where the wheels fall off the bus first. And we can bring in talent to help to solve packaging problems on the line, or maybe you take a look at your pallet specs and you're like, wow,
Yeah.
this is not, we should be doing so much better. We're shipping so much air, or
Right.
we have quality problems at the end of shelf life. I mean, there's all these different things they can bring to us and we can help troubleshoot. And so I'm really excited to bring this to the market. I think it's going to be just a fantastic way to people tap into the experts when they need them and then be done and then to come back for more, right? When you need more
Yeah.
help.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I've built the company.
It's a brilliant business model in the fact that the one thing I saw over the years, there was a time 20 years ago, 30 years ago, working with the Hoover Company or
Mhm.
Moen Faucets or some of these other bigger brands that had hired packaging engineers, the Michigan States of the world, Clemson or whatever. And then
Mhm.
there was when the economy tanked or whatever it was, they kind of booted those guys out the door. And they started to kind of like they didn't value what a packaging engineer could bring to the table, in my eyes.
Yeah.
And they literally said, "Well, just let our suppliers do the work for that. Let our
Right.
suppliers." And now that's kind of taken us back full circle to where we're at right now because the need for packaging engineers is more prevalent than ever
Yeah.
and whether it's a fractional or whether they're hiring their own, I'm amazed at how many of these big firms don't even have a packaging engineer. It's like,
Mhm.
where are you get? And that's why I think that's a big part of why we're in this mess right now of a bunch
Yeah.
of misinformation.
Yeah. And I think it's great to rely on suppliers, but I think you get to the point where you need somebody sitting on those cross functional teams to really build a cohesive plan, one that's
For
best for
what
the business.
exactly
Yeah.
versus what's best for some other company or
Yeah.
what's because a lot of times in this space and I see a lot of times people will use paper, just paper, and they the solutions are paper. Really? Why you mean to tell me there's nothing else you could use for void fill? You're going to stack
Mhm.
7 layers of corrugated together as a brace when you can
Yeah.
but that's the part where you're relying on companies, your supplier, that happens to only sell paper and paper related
Right.
products.
Yeah.
And I one of the big things about not only this podcast, but really trying to educate the next level packaging resellers that are able to talk intelligently about multiple types of products,
Yeah,
whether it's
absolutely.
plastic or paper or foam or whatever, but to marry them together because that's really what a packaging engineer does. He looks at what's
Mhm.
the best kind of a setup for, like you said, their particular company.
Mhm.
If you're shipping, bags of potato chips, or you go to the next place and they're shipping, brass faucet knobs that cannot be scratched by any stretch,
Right.
or they're going to, that's a whole different story. And you can't just use one substrate for that. It's just like,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of options out there, right? And everyone's just
Yeah,
trying their best. And so the relationships they currently have with their suppliers, if they have a good relationship, they want to lean on them first because
yeah,
I mean, life is relationships, right? And
yeah,
I think more so even after COVID, where we still aren't really seeing a lot of people, right? the relationships that we have, we want to treasure those and take care of those. And sometimes we just don't have time. They don't have time to go out and look for Googling other void fills. And so you're absolutely right, though, bringing an engineer in who's seen just so many different things, right? We're out there.
Yeah.
We're out there in a completely different way, seeing all sorts of things every day, like you wouldn't even imagine. You can leverage all of that. And I think it's can really profoundly help a lot of companies do the right thing sooner.
Well, I think your background too, and I think to tie this together, because you do, the General Mills background for you probably has a lot of benefit in the fact that you understand how the big boys play. You understand how to speak that language and how to communicate, and that's not a right or wrong. That's what a lot of people are influenced by. Oh boy, we've got to, keep up with the Joneses and make sure that we follow. Well, there's a different way to look at that. And, when I was at General Mills or when I did such and such and that, because General Mills is what, Blue Buffalo, you've got the food, you've got, you've got all kinds of other brands that are in all different types of industry. And it's not a cookie cutter approach. You have to be able to think in multiple areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And General Mills, I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for General Mills. I mean, the way that they run their business, the way they teach the people who work with them or work for them, the process and the thoughtfulness and the meaningful results, that was a phenomenal experience. And it's definitely something that we bring to the rest of the market, right? Because it's tried and true ways to think about things and to test things and to implement the right changes. And then be able to follow up and pivot if necessary, right? So
let's just focus on your company now. How do people, is that something that you are, because I'm always fascinated, with how you are connecting. Is it one-on-one or, let's just say you work with XYZ company in the past and you're asking for word of mouth. How do people find out about what it is that you do? Because actually it's much more complex than just waving a flag. There's a lot more to this, right? You can't just, and that's what I'm curious to see. How do you, because a lot of times, unfortunately, in our space, people don't give it the attention that packaging deserves, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And have you faced that too?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so, because packaging problems show up with like a variety of symptoms and they don't always point back to packaging. And so it is a lot about educating people about how to think about packaging. It's not just that paperboard carton or whatever substrate you have. So I take calls every day from people who are just like, hey, I don't know, we have this packaging problem. And we spend time talking about things. The other day, I was talking to somebody that they do canned alcoholic beverages and they're seeing pinholes and leaking and things. So we talk about ethanol and we talk about acids and we talk about the liner and how different things are impacting the pressure in the can that could be compromising the liner. I mean, a lot of it's about troubleshooting the problem and just having a conversation to see if there's anything there that we could help with. And sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't, right? Sometimes it's just like, oh, okay, well, good input. I'm going to go take that back. And so the way that I think about the people we work with is just a dynamic relationship where you call me, we talk about some things that aren't working and either frame up a project or talk about the technical solution. Sometimes it's just something really quick, but it's definitely a relationship-based company here.
I would think, especially because you've got to be able to get past the surface level. You got to get to a decision maker that understands the importance of the problem, and that's an ongoing battle. Tell us how.
It is an ongoing battle, right? Because the people who come to me with the problems are usually not the ones that are signing the check, right?
Exactly.
And so a lot of times we'll get in to do a small project like, hey, let's demonstrate how we can influence your business in a really positive way, right? Again, you don't need to hire an FTE. Let's do 5-10 hours a week and then go from there and see what works for you.
Right.
And I think there is some hesitancy, especially in sort of the consulting world where a lot of companies, especially if they have people from larger companies working there, they're a little bit jaded from consulting agencies that kind of come in and tell them the problems they already know they have, right? They really need somebody to help with the solution and a lot of times implement the solution. And that's kind of where we are, right? We're not consultants, we're contractors in the sense that we're able to actually contribute to the solution and put changes in place, whether it's testing or finding new vendors or whatever that looks like. We do the work. And that's really what's setting people apart. When they can get dynamic talent to solve their problems when they exist, right?
Right.
Like that's leverage right there.
Yeah. But do you find that it's difficult, and it's a loaded question, but do you find that it's difficult for people to admit they have a problem? It's almost like the alcoholic that swears they don't have a problem, meaning the ship is sinking. And the reason why, and I'm not trying to refute what you're saying, I'm basically just trying to throw out there, I've seen it in my place where, people are just like, yeah, it's always been like that. So whatever. But now, post COVID, people need to compete on a global scale, and they need to be they can no longer just do what, if it's Moe Fawcett, do what Kohler's doing or do what, so you have to be able to think intelligently about a particular company and what works best for you, your retailers, your distributors, whatever. And that's where I would think that you guys would be more valued than ever because of your ability to talk about multiple different types of packaging and different scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that.
Do you find, so how do people find you? Are you posting different information online? How do people understand? Because it's a challenge, to be in this packaging space and to be able to get people to take you seriously, to not just pick apart ourselves for free advice and then move on and do and implement this themselves. How do you kind of do that where you've got XYZ company that is interested in your services, but yet you're not dealing with a decision maker. This person's job was just to go out there and find a solution. Well, they found the person with the solution, but how do you get beyond that to a more of a contractor setup than just a one-off, sort of? Yeah, I'm just kind of interested.
Yeah, so like I'll get a call. Somebody will say, "Hey, we have a lot of problems with packaging. We've been relying on our suppliers. We realize that's not working because we keep making mistakes. We'll send a new product down to packaging or down to production and it doesn't fit in the packaging because we've totally missed, right?" And so then it's about helping that person I don't think people who see the problem have a problem admitting it, right? The ones that are like really working in it day in and day out, they're receiving complaints, they're seeing the bottom line get hit. It's not really those folks that are like not wanting to admit there's a problem. I think where the breakdown happens is between those people and then the people higher up who are balancing a lot of different priorities and a lot of different issues. And so what we like to do is we like having that initial 30-minute call to say, hey, okay, what's going on? Because typically it's complicated, right? Or they wouldn't be calling.
Almost like a triage kind of setup.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, got it.
Yep. And then I help build business plans and business cases for getting the work done. Like, what is the true cost of this? Hey, go figure out this stuff. Have you thought about this? And kind of helping guide them along a way to help empower them to sell in that this is the next thing we should do because the true cost of, people don't always think about the cost of inaction.
Thank you.
So there's always a cost associated with an action, but a lot of times it's less than the cost of not doing anything. So it's really breaking down the numbers and letting the numbers speak for themselves and then kind of coordinating with, of course, fiscal years and the business aspects of things. But so I mean, back to how do people find me? I have I post on LinkedIn. I go to different trade shows throughout the year. I have different speaking engagements. Like you said, it's hard to kind of get out there because we're in such the food industry is small, but yet it's spread across the entire world.
100%.
And so, it's just about building that rapport and meeting people and just in getting out there and saying, hey, this is what we do.
Well, and there's a reason, Jessica, why I wanted to at least put that out there, because I think it's important because I want to share that information too. We have a lot of listeners that could use your services, and I want to make sure, yes, as a plug for what you do, but also just like you said, and it's profound, what is this costing you if you don't do something? And what does this cost you? And again, so many packaging resellers in our world, they come to me or they come to us and I'll ask those questions. Well, what are they currently using? I don't know. Well, did you ask no, obviously. Okay. What is this problem costing you? Meaning, is it, and again, sometimes these numbers are just crazy. The
Yeah,
cost being,
millions.
if you're not
Mhm.
making that delivery to Target and you're paying 20, 25 grand a day because your
Mhm.
product didn't arrive on time, you could have the best packaging in the world, but you've got a supply chain issue. You got a huge
Yes.
issue there. Then you go to the flip side where you've got a product that is inadequate for, the glass is breaking or the components are getting damaged or whatever. And it's so few of us out here, for Pete's sake, that are, speaking that, what is this costing you? And if you don't do something here, you could truly be out of business. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
many, you cannot, and that's why I'm always thrilled when you and I get to talk like this, because I think it can really help other people. And that's the whole premise of the podcast, whole premise of what we're doing, is just to create a community of people that, that just share this information and
Mhm.
share, what people do. And I can't tell you how many times people have said, well, who do I call for this? And what do I
Yeah.
do for that? Well, obviously that would be you. And that's the one thing I want to make sure that, we'll do, and we'll make sure that we link to your company website
Thank
and who
you.
you are. But man, it's such a very broad stroke in this industry that we're both passionate about. But I just know that, the Me Too and doing what's always been done isn't working anymore. The system's broke.
Yeah.
The system
Yeah.
needs, fixed, or at least people talking about fixing it, for
Mhm.
lack of a better way to put it. Make sense?
Yeah, I agree.
Ugh, drives
That's
me
what we're
crazy.
doing.
I know, that's sort of the whole idea of this, and I want to thank you for
Yeah.
taking the time. And the way I usually land the plane is to ask you, if you had your magic wand, Jessica, if you were able to wave that magic wand, and whether that be fix the industry, make change, do something, or instantly we can educate the next
Mhm.
generation, is there anything out there that you would, and again, if you don't know it, that's fine too. But how do we start moving this in the right direction? How do we start, for example, collecting this information, collecting people, and making connections in a way that doesn't that we've got to be able to start to share about packaging from a, don't think of it at the last minute, think of it at the
Yeah.
beginning. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But anyhow, I went off on a tangent there. But how
Yeah,
would you
no.
fix it? What would you do?
Yeah. I think you're onto something there. I think the industry is kind of slowly, I suppose, waking up to being more aware of when packaging should start to, come up. But
Right,
in general, I think it's to stay curious, really.
right.
I mean,
Good
if
point.
you're people move around different companies every 5 years on average, or 5 to 7 years, stay curious. And I think when you see the same problem showing up every day, sometimes it just makes you really tired. And you almost sometimes don't even see it anymore because it's just the cost of doing business. But if people can stay curious and if they can keep asking questions and seeking a better answer, that's really where the solution is. It's the people who are doing it every day, who are staying curious and non-judgmental and trying not to get frustrated, but kind of staying with it to find the solution, right? There's solutions out there everywhere. The solution
Yeah,
is there.
right.
It might not look how you think it will. And so that's where that curiosity really plays a huge role in solving problems. Yeah.
I think that's a great way to, you know what, the being curious as well, and having the support system, if you will, to, like you said, if the same problem is coming up over and over again, well, be part of the solution, meaning, let pay attention to that. Be curious about that and say, well,
Yeah.
wait a minute, this problem continues to come up. And, and again, I don't know if you've seen this in your place as we land this plane, but at least domestically here, there's a lot of companies since COVID, I don't care whether they're manufacturers, distributors, or whatever in this space, are running short staffed. They no
Hmm.
longer have the number of employees that used to handle some of these things. So, to your
Right.
point about being curious, it's being curious about all facets of the whole supply chain. Yes, it could be
Hmm.
the packaging and the inefficient packaging and damage, but it also could be supply chain and making sure you're dealing with the right people that are actually following through. If you've got a delivery date of XYZ, you got to make sure that that's hitting that date, and you just can't afford to be shut down. And there's just all these pieces, parts to this that have to be looked at, not just the packaging part.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
All right, Jessica. Well, again, what is the website? And I want to make sure that we get this on here, but I'll also link it when we do the full edit.
Yeah, it's just strategicpackagingpartners.com.
Got it. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
A happy new year to you, the family.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's David Marinak. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to see more, here's another video that you can check out, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.